The special meeting of the Waco Independent School Board is hereby called to order. All items which may be discussed or voted upon this evening have been posted as required by state law. I extend a warm welcome to those present and to our television viewers. The board's purpose is to set goals, listen to reports of the superintendent, approve budgets, contracts, and personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. We are not here to make management decisions or solve problems of individuals. Management is the responsibility of the superintendent or staff. I ask that you turn your cell phones to silent alert if you have not already done so. We appreciate the time you have taken to join us and for your interest in the Waco Independent School District. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment? No. We'll move on to item 3, review and discuss the proposal budget and tax rate for 2025-26 fiscal year presented by Ms. Davis.
No, not on. Sorry. So the debt service fund is mostly, the debt is set when we issue bonds and, or refund bonds. And then other thing that really affects it is the tax rate and the property values. And then this year, and even last year a little bit, the hold harmless, that has had much more of an impact than it has in previous years just because of the increase in the homestead exemption. So we'll start with looking a little bit at the general fund again. Just a review because some of you are new and probably haven't had this. I review it even when you're not new, but that's okay. Legal requirements and overview of the budget process. Then we'll talk, I have the enrollment in here. It's the same slide we had last time, but I always want to put it in here so I've got that reference point of what we use for our revenue projections. And then our certified property values and the proposed tax rates that come off of those. And then we'll look at the funds required to be adopted in the official budget, which are the general fund, the child nutrition fund, and the debt service fund. And then there are 4 other budgets, 3 funds that you will also adopt. We don't really talk about those a lot because we are just the fiscal agent for those funds, but we'll talk about them at the end. So, the legal requirements for the budget. They must be developed in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, which means we have to have the budget set on the same basis, and governmental funds are on a modified accrual basis of accounting, so we have to adopt or set the budgets in the same way. And for districts with a September 1st, now districts have a choice of 2 fiscal years. You can have a June 1st through July 31st, or a September 1 through August 31. We still have, originally you could only have September 1 through August 31, and we still are doing that. At some point, a lot of districts have changed to a July 1 because they feel like it sort of fits with school starting earlier, they feel like that sort of fits your school calendar better. The problem with that is many years you don't actually know what your funding is going to be by June 1st or, actually, or July 1st, because you're looking at setting a budget early in June, and you may, like this year, and that would have been very difficult to interpret all the changes in the law and still get that out. Also, you don't know what your certified values are, and they do. That's less important, I think, than it would have been, say, 10 years ago before HB 3 in 2019. Because there wasn't that symbiotic relationship between state revenue and property taxes, but that is something that the district could consider at some point of changing their fiscal year. And then we have to have a public hearing, and it must be held prior to the adoption of the budget and tax rate. We will do our public hearing on the night of the 28th before you adopt the budget and tax rate. And then the so from tonight, when you set the date for that, for the 28th to adopt those two things, we will have to advertise in the paper. We have to give 10 days notice of that public hearing and adoption. And the budget must be adopted by August 31st. Past August 31st into September, you don't have a budget. You don't legally have the authority to spend, because for governmental authorities, the budget is your legal authority to obligate the district. And then the last day to adopt a tax rate is September 30th, or 60 days after the certification of the roll. So we did get our roll certified on the 24th, so that would be 60 days from that date. And then the budget has to be adopted before you adopt the tax rate. So these are the budgets that are included in the official budget. There's the general fund, of course, as you can see, makes up most of our official budget. It's 80% of our official budget. In green there, you see our debt service fund, which is 12% of the official budget. And then the special revenue funds are 8%. However, of those, that's mostly child nutrition fund, which is part of the official budget. And then it has those other funds that I just talked about that we will also adopt budgets for. Those other funds are, we have two in the 497 fund, which is the Greater Waco Advanced Academies. Both Guama and Waco have separate budgets. And then the Challenge Academy, which is our juvenile justice alternative education program. We are the fiscal agent for that program, even though the detention center is located in La Vega. We've been the fiscal agent, I think, since I protested an increase back in maybe 2006 or 7. Anyway, and then the last one, we are also the fiscal agent for the Regional Day School Program for the deaf. So this is the factors that influence the budget. We shouldn't be a surprise. We've talked a lot about these. Of course, this year I put number 1, state legislation, because that had the biggest influence on our budget this year. Student enrollment and attendance, our property values and tax rates, and property values and the tax collections, because those two numbers will influence how much we get for state revenue. And then the available federal funding, we did talk about that some. The freeze that we had for those funds has been lifted, at least for this coming year, and so we should not see much of an impact. We did get a revised planning estimate for our title funds yesterday, and it did go down a little bit, but we're just talking about $40,000 overall. And then, of course, the recruitment and retention, that does affect because we're looking at salaries and benefits to keep us competitive, and then inflation and other unavoidable cost increases. The budget goals, first, is prioritizing student achievement. The second one is the effective, efficient, and you might recognize these from our strategic plan a little bit. Our efficient and effective resource allocation, and then investing in staff and staff development and retention of staff, monitoring and improving facilities and technology, investing in the physical security. That was a little bit higher priority previous cycle, but we've put a lot of money into our safety and security over the last few years, so we kind of moved some of these other things up. And then lastly, the long-term financial stability and transparency. Now, financial stability is higher up for me, but that's okay. So, on funding of school districts, so we've talked about this, property taxes, most of our money, property taxes, and state foundation school program. This is the general fund. Almost all of our money comes from this source. Over 90% of our revenues come from these two sources. First of all, property taxes. The values are determined by the appraisal district, so it's very important that we have good appraisals. There were a few years back in, actually, or shortly before I came here, I think in 2002, 3, that we were not getting the local values because our local values were not what the comptroller's office thought they should be, because they do a study, and if your values are not consistent with what they think they should be, they will give you state values rather than local values. So then the tax rate is comprised of two rates: our maintenance and operations rate that funds our general fund, and then our interest and sinking rate that funds our debt service, our bonded debt. The M&O rate is compressed since it has been compressed. It started being compressed in 2005. And we'll look at a chart on that in a little while. But it has become, since 2019 and HB3, that compression changed, and it gets compressed every year now. So it gets calculated by the state based on the average property values and property value increases throughout the state. And our base rate gets compressed that way. So we have this maximum compressed rate that we start with. And then we do have additional enrichment pennies that are available through the VATR, which we did have a tax ratification election in 2015, and we did vote in 13 additional pennies. Now, those have been compressed somewhat now, too. So we'll look at that, too. Oops. State funding. So on the state funding, the formulas are set by the legislature, which we just got through doing. Our basic allotment now is $6,215. It has been set for the biennium. There is no adjustment for inflation. The allotments are impacted by your enrollments in some cases. For instance, some of our allotments, like those new allotments, were based on enrollment, not average daily attendance. We talked about that. And then average daily attendance is basically probably the biggest factor for most of our allotments. Our regular ed is based on average daily attendance, as well as some of our special programs. And then those special populations, identification of special populations such as bilingual or special ed, career and technology. Then our property values and wealth, and then the property tax collections, because our property tax collections are our local share of that revenue. Then again, our enrichment pennies that are approved by the local tax payers, that helps with our guaranteed yield. So as I said, over 90% of the general fund's revenues comes from those two sources. And the relationships, we've talked about this before, the way it's set, the formulas are now, it doesn't matter. Back in the day, we had to be really careful about setting those, making sure we had them perfect to get them to calculate our revenues. Now, if you're off a little bit on your collections, then that's just going to be offset by our state program revenue to a large extent anyway. So it's less important, which is good since we have to project so many things out way in advance of knowing what they're going to be. So that's a little bit helpful that that we don't have to be as careful about that. So, funding of school districts. The state allotments, like I said, are based mainly on ADA, and then the special programs allotments that are based on weighted ADA. They have a weight for these special programs that varies depending on the program. So you see those there: bilingual education, career technology, college, career, military readiness, comp ed, dyslexia, early childhood, gifted and talented, and special education. The other allotments that we talked about that are not, Tier 2 funding is also based on ADA. However, like the new teacher allotment is based on teacher counts and the experience of teachers. So that's the way we'll get that funding. TEA has already put something out based on our PEAMS report on how many teachers we had at each experience level and have estimated what we're going to get. But will be built, that will change based on PEAMS throughout the year. They'll evaluate that. So then, as I said, we talked about this last month. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but we have a projected enrollment loss of 187 between last year and this year. First day, I think we were down about 550 kids, but that's coming back up. I think we had 274 the register that first day, so that's coming back up. And then our projected average daily attendance, there was a loss of 143, and that's the number I'm using to calculate our state revenue. On the property values, the current year state certified property values are used to calculate the foundation program revenue. And the district has to estimate those values because there are differences even as I said, the comptroller is going to look at that and make sure our values equal what they think they should be. There's still differences between the local values used to collect property taxes and the property values used in our state funding, because there are some exemptions that we may grant that the state does not grant. So I think that some of those that I have listed there, like Freeport exemption, leased vehicles, pollution control, solar energy deductions, they do not, when you're calculating your state revenue, they do not allow for the TIF. We have one TIF left, TIF number 3, that I think will end next year. But they do come back and give us a supplemental revenue. They will come in and survey us in the fall or in the spring, and we do get some supplemental revenue to make up for the fact that it's not included here.
Cheryl, when with the TIF, you say it is ending, will that opportunity come back again in the future?
No problem. Not unless the law changes. In 1998, they changed the law. All our TIFs were prior to 1998. They changed the law in 1998. School districts, and it's because of the way that the state funding works, school districts could not enter into a new TIF. Because we've been held harmless, basically, for the taxes that we put into a TIF. So as of 98, we can't enter into a new TIF or expand an existing TIF and still be held harmless. And this TIF number 3 is a small one. It's not, the TIF number 1 was the big one that we, I think, ended 2 years ago. So the legislation, particularly Senate Bill 4, Senate Bill 23, and House Bill 9, increased the homestead exemption for this coming year. Now, again, that has to go to the voters in November, but the legislature gave us the direction to go ahead and use those lower values because, so far the voters haven't voted them down yet. So I think they just told us to go ahead and use those and do it in our calculations. So the homestead exemption moved from 100,000 to 140,000, and the over 65 disabled from 10,000 to 60,000. And then they instituted a business personal property exemption of 125,000. And again, these have to be approved by the voters in November. So the estimated 2025 T2 value for the state funding purposes is $8,541,113 and $693. That's like I said, that's our what we call the CPTD values. This is what it looks like for our local values. This chart is our local values. This is what we will tax on. Our net taxable values, you see those. We had our preliminary values were about $9.2 billion. That came down. Our certified values were $8.8 billion. That $9.2 billion that was preliminary, They did give us this based on the new homestead exemptions as well. So that's not a difference. There's been years that, that was not in our preliminary. We didn't get a run with those numbers in it, but this year we did get that. So that is a decrease of about 357 million. Most of that is because of appeals that they might have between when the preliminary is done April 30th. And so then we get the certified on July 25th, by July 25th. So the change from preliminary to final certified is a 3.9% decrease. And then from the prior year, as you can see, because this now is impacted by the homestead exemption, because last year our homestead exemption was, of course, 100,000. This year it's 140,000. So the taxable values now are 4.65% lower than they were last year. But our actual values went up 1.75%. So we still did have a small increase, not as big as it has been in some years. As you can see in some of those previous years, we had rather large increases in the years, but this year was only 1.75%. So then this is our other effective tax rate assumptions that we have to do in calculating our tax rate. So we have total new market value of 170 million this year, and then our new taxable value is 155 million. The new exemptions value lost is $43 million, and the increased exemptions value loss is $585 million. So you can see our average homestead value. We had the count of the residences. There was 14,631 last year, 14,684 this year. So we did have some increase, about 53 residences in this past year. The average market value of them went up slightly from 240,000 to 242,000. The average homestead residence exemptions went up considerably from 129,000 to 153,000. So that brings the average taxable value of residences down. So our average value went from $110,000 last year to $89,000 this year. So we do have some protested properties still outstanding as of the time they certified our values. There's 43 of them, which is really not bad, because there's been years we've had a lot more than that. The market value of those is 23.8 million, and the value that they included in our numbers was 16.7 million. So this is where we estimate what our tax rate or what our tax collections are going to be for funding. So the total current delinquent collections will be 64.3 million for M&O and 21.4 million for INS, for a total M&O and INS collections of $85.7 million. The total current M&O taxes levied is $87.3 million. We are estimating that we're going to pay into that TIF number 3 that we were just talking about, 108,000. And then our tax refunds that are under the tax code, made under the tax code, are $38,744 estimate. That's what they were actually certified at for this past year. Since it's a low amount, I just used that same number going forward for next year. So the tax office also has to certify, by law, has to certify a collection rate for us. So our current year collection rate was 102%. Our year 2 collection rate was 103%, and our year 1 was 97%. Now they can't make us go above 100%. So last year they actually wanted me to do 100%. I set it a little bit lower because the year 1 last year was even lower than that, 97%. So we did so in the next section, you see we overcollected a little bit this year, because that year before there were so many adjustments because of homestead exemption. There were so many that when we were adopting it the year before, we actually collected less and we drew down our fund balance considerably in our debt service fund because there were the adjustments were so high from that particular year. So last year, I wanted to try to bring it up a little bit. They don't really let you bring it up much, so I'm going to have to pay it back this year. That's okay, I got some interest revenue on it anyway. Well, that's $500,000. So the INS levy paid was 23.9 million. The total INS disbursements were 24.1. So you can see we're actually shelling out more than we're getting. Even with that, we still have to pay this $500,000 back. So but that's because of the state revenue that we get. We'll look at that. Less the TIF amount for the prior year, 3,740, and the TIF current year calculated portion is 40,230. So our total INS that we need is 24,074,328. Our previous year debt was this 23,571,380. So our excess collections were $502,000. So I have to set a tax rate for this coming year that will pay back that $502,000, sort of. So here is the calculation of our tax rate. This is our MCR, our maximum compressed rate as set in law now. So we could start out with our prior year comptroller certified taxable values. We look at what the chief appraiser certified values were. Then we bring in what our new central chief appraiser's values are, and that 4.65% decrease. And then from there, that's where we get that new comptroller, we estimate that new comptroller's value. Now, this is, a very important number in calculating state revenue. This calculation doesn't always work out completely, but this is where we start. So using that, though, and using the state property value increases across the whole state, and the average increases, then the state will calculate this maximum compressed tax rate. Gone are the days when we could actually set a tax rate. If the 3 cent, we could do that extra 3 cents if that's what we wanted to. Now we're really restricted on what we can set for a tax rate. So our maximum compressed tax rate is 62.81 or 0.6281. The local preliminary MCR is the same. The state compression percentage was 63.22. And so the limitation, this is a minimum that they set that they can't make us go below this amount, which is the 56.89. So we get the lesser of our local preliminary MCR or the state compression percentage. So the lesser of this one is our local number, which is the 62.81. Then we add in those previously approved voter pennies that we did in 2015, 8 cents for our golden pennies, and then 5.83 cents for our copper pennies. Now, that's a 13.83 cent enrichment rate. We actually approved in 2015 17 cents. So the copper pennies rate has been compressed from the original, I think it was, what would it have been, 9 cents, I guess, that we got then, down to this 5.83 cents. So while that is built into the formula, so it doesn't necessarily negatively impact us at this point, it does leave us capacity. Now, it's not a lot of capacity, but we do have a tax rate capacity of 3.17 cents if we wanted to do another TRE to go out for the voters to approve that. Right now, though, our total M&O tax rate with our enriched pennies is 7.664, same rate it was last year for M&O, is unchanged. And then our INS tax rate that is required to pay our debt is going to be 26.02 cents for a total tax rate of $1.02.
Ms. Davis, the golden pennies and the copper pennies, Are those hours to indefinitely, because they were approved by voters? Is that correct? So this isn't,
Unless the law changes.
unless, so those are like, we can count on that ongoing unless the legislature,
And I mean, they have, I mean, there's some things that they have done. This year, for instance, they took we were supposed to have an inflationary adjustment on our enrichment tax rates, or on our guaranteed yield piece that we get off of these pennies. Now, we did not get that adjustment. They took out that inflationary adjustment from the law, and they put it toward the increase in the basic allotment. So we still gained some money on that for sure, but we would have gained more had they not decreased that inflationary adjustment on the guaranteed yield. Now, we are getting sort of out to where, reason it probably didn't hurt us as much as we're richer than we were when we used to get a lot more from the guaranteed yield than we do now, because we were a much poorer district. But they can manipulate it in that way, and they did this year.
okay, thanks.
Okay, so here is what our comparison of the tax rate for the 2-year. Last year, again, like I said, 7664 was the tax rate for M&O, so there's no change there. Our interest and sinking last year was 28.254. We are adopting a rate of 2602 for the current year, or proposing a rate for that. And then, so that is a 2.2 cent reduction in the debt service rate and in the total tax rate, because our total tax rate last year was $1.489, and this year will be $1.266. So again, that same 2.2 cent decrease in the tax rate. Now, during the bond election, I do have a note there that during the bond election, we estimated that rate would be 32 cents. But because the property value increases and the increase in the homestead exemption, that is only going to be the 26 cents. So we're way under, 6 cents under what we had said during the bond election. So here is what that looks like with all these changes in the law that we've had over the years. We go back to 2005, but when the law first started changing, there was that's what, we were right at $1.45, I think, in our M&O, so just under $1.60 in total. And then, so the first year in 2006, they compressed our M&O rate from that $1.50 cap. Like I said, we were only at $1.45, but they compressed it down to, I think it was $1.30 that first year. And then the second year, it went down to $1.04. So the maximum rate you could have had was $1.04. So then we had our TRE, well, in 2015, so you can see that went up a little bit. Our M&O amounts went up a little bit, and the dark blue at the bottom is our debt service rate. The lighter blue is our general fund. And so as it has started compressing in 2019, you can see that general fund piece getting smaller and smaller as they have compressed the tax rate. And we're getting more money from the state. I mean, we're not necessarily losing money. We're not gaining money, but we're not really necessarily losing money from the state, but more of it's coming from the state coffers than from our local property taxes. So then looking at our revenue challenges, we have continuing enrollment declines. As I just talked about, we've got some loss this year is coming up, but we're not quite sure where that will be yet. Then there was this year the clarification of the new state funding allocations. I was telling Dr. Spicer, I have templates from 3 different sources. Moat Casey put out one, Tasbo put out one, Omar Garcia put out one on Region 13, ran the same numbers through all 3 and got 3 different answers. Not always really close answers either. So it was even the experts were, I think, a little confused on this year. And then, of course, as we talked about, there's an interest rate uncertainty. We have been generating a lot of money off of our investment income. They are kind of saying it will go down in September, but they said that last year too. And then there's the loss of our indirect cost revenue that was generated off our federal stimulus funds. That's already built into this budget we're going to look at. We've already taken some loss for that. And then we still aren't quite sure what's going to happen with our Medicaid funding, SHARS, and our MAC program. I've also taken those down somewhat, but I'm not quite sure where we need to be with those. On the expenditure challenges, we had a lot of program increases that were mandated with the new legislation, mostly salary increases. And then we had unavoidable rate increases that we've talked about, utilities, fuels, insurance, those kinds of things. And we've had some budget shortfalls, including our health benefits that we have to make up. And then, we have an inability to meet the market wage rates right now. We did increase some of our auxiliary and paras a few years ago, but, the market's catching up with us on that. And we're still not really, certainly not ahead of the market with our teacher rates, wage rates either. And then we have a lack of funding that has been for a number of years now for maintenance, technology, vehicle replacements. We did put a lot of money into buying buses as we brought transportation in last year, but I think we bought 5 special ed buses and 3 of those microbuses, so we still need to be replacing buses. Looking at our beginning fund balance was $65.1 million. We had a projected deficit in the current year of $7.5 million. I think that that was the projected deficit for budget. That has come down considerably. I had it at so that would have given us a beginning fund balance for this year of 57.6. That 7.5 million that we adopted in the budget last year is going to come down considerably. I think that's going to be at least $3 million less than that. So we'll probably have somewhere around 3.5 to 4 million. A big chunk of that, though, is we received some insurance recovery for hail damage and some roof projects. That was $1.5 million. We had budgeted for that. We've only spent 60,000 of it. So those funds need to roll over. We've got some bids coming to do that work on those roofs. So that's one thing that did not get spent. And I think we've got some other revenues that I still don't have a number from the state. The comptroller's office gave us new numbers on the appeal of our 2021 values, but that has still not been run through the formulas by TEA, so I'm not quite sure what that is going to be. But I think that projected deficit is going to be much better because we have underspent quite a bit on the current year. Our estimated revenues coming into this next year is $162.5 million. Our proposed appropriations were $168.9, which was a $6.4 million of revenues over, or expenditures over revenues, and then we have our an operating transfer that we do to cover the losses in Waco, and the Day School for the Deaf. Then our net change in fund balance, instead of the 8.2 million it was last year, is only 6.7, so that's some better. And we'll underspend that because, I mean, as much as I build in salary savings when I put in the salary proposals, I only budget group health because we have a lot of our employees don't take it. I budget it at about 80% of what the actual fee is. So I do try to build in a lot of salary savings, but with vacancies and other under expenditures, we always underspend by several $1 million. The proposed ending fund balance at August 31st is right now is 50.9 million, and that's 30.1% of our expenditures, which under our policy, we need to be at 20%. So we're still in good shape as far as that goes. So here is a look at the proposed budget for the general fund. As we talked about, you can see the $162.4 million in revenues. Of that, 68.7 is local revenue, mostly property tax collections. The other big chunk would be investment earnings is kind of a large amount there. The rest of them are not very large amounts. We get money from, athletics, from rentals and gate receipts and just those kinds of things. A small amount from tuition. We get some fiscal agent fees from those programs we just talked about that they pay us as their fiscal agent. State programs, two pieces here, $90.8 million in total for state revenues. Part of that, about $9 million of that, is the TRS on behalf. So for TRS, we pay in a portion of TRS, and then the state also contributes some towards our retirement program. The way it basically works is if you're a certified employee, like a teacher, whatever, they will pay TRS up to the statutory minimum schedule. Now, the statutory minimum schedule is pretty low compared to what most districts are paying now. And then anything that we pay over statutory minimum, then we have to pay TRS on. And that does not impact any of our auxiliary or paraprofessional staff. The state will pay on them completely, but on teachers or any other certified personnel, supervisors, administrators, then we have to pay a portion of that. But that's about $9 million that they do contribute towards our retirement. And then federal programs, mostly indirect cost revenues, MAC and SHARS, what we still have of that, and that's about $3 million for next year. On our expenditures, about 99 million of that is in instruction and instructional related services. As you can see, that's up considerably from the adopted budget of 92.8 million this past year. Reason for that is because most of our new revenue went into teacher salary increases and then the benefits that had to go along with that. So most of that increase is in the teacher salaries. Instructional and school leadership actually went down slightly from 12.9 adopted last year to 12.7 in the adopted budget for this year. That's your campus leadership, principals' offices, and your program leadership in central office for instruction. On student support services, again, that went down slightly from 19.7 million to 19.5 million. Student support services includes guidance and counseling, social work services, health services, transportation, food service, not in the general fund, but and then extracurricular activities. And then our administrative support services also went down from 6.1 million down to a little bit, still at 6.1 million, but from 6.124 to 6089. Non-student based support services went up $1 million. That went from 27.4 million to 28.5 million. Now, non-student support services includes plant maintenance and operations, security and monitoring services, and technology. So again, we've still had some rather large increases in our in safety and security, but we also had some increases in our maintenance and operations as well, such as property insurance. We know that went up about $300,000 because of the new buildings. Anyway, so that went up. And part of it was we were just a little bit low on some of I took a little bit too much salary savings out of plant maintenance and operations last year because we did that good salary increase. They actually kept their employees almost the entire year. They were fully staffed most of the year, and that has not been the case for a number of years. So, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. Good thing that we were staffed. I know maintenance appreciated that they had staff all year. Community services went from 1 million down to 581,000. Now, that is mostly because the transformation zone contract that we had last year was part of community services. And since that ended, that is that decrease for, in the community services. Debt services went up from 318,000 to $480,000. And then our intergovernmental charges went from 1,965,000 to 2.127. It did go up. And we talked about that. Intergovernmental charges are mostly payments that we make to the Challenge Academy, payments that for our share of the Challenge Academy, payments to the Day School for the Deaf for our students that are attending there, payments into the TIF are in here, and finally, the payments to the appraisal district, our share of the appraisal district, which again went up $85,000 this year. So we're going to check that out, right? Anyway, so that is the increase there for the intergovernmental charges. So our total expenditures, again, is 168.9 million. Other sources and uses, that is actually down because our enrollments in Guama and Guaca are up. So last year I budgeted it at 535,000. It ended up being about 331,000, it looks like. So it's going to be consistent with that next year, 298,000. We did raise our tuition a little bit for Guama. We didn't raise it for Guaca, but we did raise it a little bit for Guama. It hasn't been raised in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. So we raised it slightly. But while that number goes down, up here in instruction, that increased tuition that we pay to them is actually in that number too. So we didn't really save a lot of money on that. So our net change in fund balance again is 6.7 million. So the beginning fund balance of 57.6 down to 50.9 is projected for budget purposes. Kevin, I'm not going to really talk. We talked a little bit more about these revenues last time, so I'm not going to really go into detail. If there's any questions, we can kind of see where they went up. Local revenues. Again, our property taxes, because of the homestead exemption, are going down about $1.2 million. And our state foundation school program, with all those new revenues that we receive for salary increases and all, actually went up 6.1 million. So offset of those two, just not including like the investment income going down, which is just an estimate at this point, is about 4.9 million, were actually picked up between the two. So our total local and intermediate source revenue, actually that's our total revenue, is down about $1 million overall. Oh, let me just address a little bit on when you see these decreases in the federal funds, some of that is E-rate projects that we had this year that we may or may not get again, depending on applying for them. And then again, we talked about that Medicaid. On our appropriations, this is the increase in appropriations, pretty flat with, this is by object of expenditure instead of functional expenditures like you're required to adopt for budget purposes. So biggest increases here is in payroll, which is to be expected because that's where we got our new money, was for those salary increases. So as you can see, we have the biggest increase there is payroll. Most of the other things were rather flat. Supplies and materials went up slightly. Contracted services is down. Other operating costs are down. And our debt service and capital outlay don't even really show on the chart because we don't really have a lot of cost in those areas for the general fund.
Ms. Davis, does TRS, I know that, with the teacher pay raises and some of that being from the state, some of it from us. So looking at the payroll costs for this projected year, is that including the TRS contributions?
Yes, it is.
Okay, in the payroll cost diagram here.
Because the payroll cost will include salaries, wages, and all the benefits.
Okay.
and some of those other benefits that are associated with that salary increase, Medicare, workers' comp, unemployment, um, health insurance went up too. It's not a feature of the salary increase, but that one, as we talked about, did go up quite a bit as well. So this kind of looks at what those salary increase benefits were. Again, we've talked about this before on how much this cost of the increase for the teachers was 3.7 million, and then our administrative, professional, and auxiliary, and all. So total cost of the salary increases was just under 5 million, 4.9 million. Our benefits that were related to that were $589,000. We received money under HB2 of $3.7 million. So we came up with out of other monies, which included to some extent, because the benefits were included in that ABC allotment that we got, that we could pay for the benefits with that. So we came up with $1.8 million outside of that money that was given to us for the salary increases. Again, we talked about this last time, what our other other cost increases were. There's that benefit number of $1.3 million, an increase in our state funding for special education. So $2.3 million went into that program. It is offset by revenue, so that is cost neutral in a lot of respects for us. And then our tuition costs went up for the JJAEP and advanced academics went up to $308,000, I was talking about a while ago. And then our property and casualty insurance went up $200,000. This is the Child Nutrition Fund budget. Right now, I do have this balanced. We will probably be coming, well, I know we'll be coming back in September as we identify some projects, because we still do need to draw this fund balance down. We have an excess, unlike some districts, we actually make money in our food service program. And so we have an excess fund balance here, and we need to draw that down. Right now, we have 1.2 million in campus walk-in cooler freezers that we have bid and that will be constructed in this coming year. That's not included in this budget yet. We'll amend that in once we get into the next year, and then 0.5 million in emergency generators. We have to spend down 2.8 million of this fund balance to be in compliance with TDA. You can only keep 3 months worth of fund balance for your program, and we're over that amount.
Is it hard? It just seems like, and this isn't against our cafeteria food service, anyway, seems like for the past 2 or 3 years, we've always had extra in this, and it's always been waiting for coolers or refrigerators or something. Is that like a delay that we can expect every year?
Part of it, because the freezer coolers we talked about last year are these same freezer coolers. They didn't get done this year.
Okay.
So
So it rolls over then.
yeah, so we bid them, we had the design work done and all this past year and bid them, and I think they were awarded maybe last month at the board meeting. Oh, they'll come in August, so they'll be awarded this month, but then they won't be constructed and spent until next year. So
So-
it's the same ones we were talking about last year.
It's the same thing. So will we be able to pull that down this year to
I'm
within?
hoping so. I mean, we did a lot of equipment purchases this past year. We did draw it down about, it looks like we're going to draw it down about 400,000 this year from some of the small equipment items that we got. But yeah, part of the thing is, I shouldn't probably say that out loud. We could probably, they get paid on the same salary schedules. We have to have an adopted salary schedule, and we could probably, we also have a contract. We contract our food service program, and TDA keeps a tight control on those contracts. We have to, even the bid form that goes out, TDA has to approve. And so we're really limited, and they have to make money. So part of the contract with Sodexo is they have to make money, so they keep adding to our fund balance, and We're like, "Yeah, well, we need to draw this down." So I think there needs to be, well, I know we've talked about maybe bringing that in-house like we did for the transportation department, and that might be something that needs to be looked at in future years, but um, right now, the services has improved this past year, and so we're hoping, we've stayed with them. We have another year on the contract, one more year after this. Yeah, so that is something that we could look at that time. So anyway, it looks like they're going to be about 7.3 million because we did draw it down some this year for next year until we amend in that money to do those, that walk-in freezer cooler. So then our debt service funds, this is what the debt service budget looks like. Again, we are going to be drawing that down, not the $502,000 that we're required to under, because of our excess tax collections last year, but because we have some investment income and we have some hold harmless, well, the hold harmless goes into the calculation, but because we have some investment income in our local revenues, that does give us a little bit of a cushion on drawing that 502,000. It only looks like it'll draw it down about 237,000. So that still gives us pretty good shape. You can see we got down to about 3.9 million. Ending fund balance in 23-24, which was a little bit low for us because we'd been running over 4 million. And so when you have at least a little bit of fund balance, it cushions you against those adjustments in values because you have no other source really of revenue for the debt service fund, and you want to be able to have some flexibility in case, if you do choose to refund bonds or do something of that nature. So this will be, like I said, that will have an ending fund balance with what's planned right now of 5.3 million. Our debt service for this next year in principal payments will be 10,250,000. You can see that is up quite a bit from what it's been. Our principal payments this past year were 5,240,000, and then that's going to be 10,250,000 this year. So the way the debt was structured, the investment interest revenue is coming down considerably from 20.7 million down to 15.8 million, and then that difference will be picked up in principal payments. So looking at that, what it looks like, they keep it very flat. When you issue bonds, part of what your financial advisor's job is to do is to keep this debt flat so you can keep a fairly even tax rate on this. So you can see we have paid off our 2016 series will be paid off in 2030. There's just a little bit left on that. And the 2016 series was a refunding of some of our 2008-9 bonds that we issued when we built University and Hines, Dean Highland, and Bells Hill. And then the 21 series in yellow was actually refunded the rest of the 2008-9 bonds and another bond series that we still had outstanding. These are actually taxable bonds. So all of the repairs or the renovations and additions that we did with 2008 and 9, because this is the 2008 bonds that were completely refunded with these bonds. Because they're taxable, there is no penalty to where if you were to get rid of one of those buildings, that you would have to pay money back to the bonds because they were taxable bonds to begin with. So then the orange is our 2022 bonds that we issued in this last election, and the green is our 2022B. The 22 were issued in March or so, and then the 22B were in August, so they ended up with both 22s. And then 23 was the last series and the final bonds that we had available to us with the 2021 election. So those will pay off. The 22 and 22B pay off in 2052, and the 2023 bonds pay off in 2053. But as you can see, they remain pretty stable from 2039, when those 2021 refunding bonds finish, to 2053 or 2052. So these are the other budgets, as I said, that are required to be adopted by the board. Our two budgets that make up the Greater Waco Advanced Academies, the healthcare and the manufacturing. Healthcare budget is about $1,251,000. The manufacturing budget is $1,369,000. Now, the healthcare program is funding itself currently. Guama still is just a little short, even with the increase that we did of funding its program. So it's about $67,000 or $68,000 short of funding its program. McLennan County Challenge Academy, they get no money ever because I control that pocketbook, and so they're always in balance. And then the day school for the deaf is the sources there. They are the ones that are dipping into our fund balance, if you will, because that's most of what we have to move over there to make them whole is for the day school for the deaf. So their expenditures right now are budgeted at $795,000, and the revenues are $564,000. So we'll need to transfer $230,000 over there to make them whole. Okay, that's it for the proposed budget. So tonight you will need to set the date for the public meeting to adopt, for the hearing, and then the adoption of the budget and the tax rate. And then the only other thing on the calendar after that is 9/1 is the start of the fiscal year. We roll those new budgets in.
We gotta make this was this one. We got it. We're moving, thank you, Ms. Davis. We're moving on to item number 4, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding the notice of the public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate for the 2025-26 fiscal year. Setting the proposal tax rate and the date, time, and place for the public meeting presented by Cheryl Davis.
So what you have in your packet here is the actual notice that will go in the paper this weekend, that this is our truth in taxation, the notice as required by law that sets out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the public hearing. I kind of go through some of these calculations there. Gives you the same that we've just kind of talked about, with comparison of the budget and the increase decrease over last year, the appraised values, talking about what our bonded indebtedness is. We still have outstanding bonds of $444 million, and then it compares those rates with last year's rates to generate the same amount of revenue to cover our programs. And then there's a comparison of the levy with last year's levy and the impact on the average resident. So with that homestead exemption, it would go down $222 a year. And then the fund balances are estimated at the point in time I gave this to the comptrollers. Also in that packet is that we are now required to give you is the tax rate calculation worksheet. This is what the tax office actually does this for us and goes ahead and calculates what we can use. And so we have a circular calculation with this. We go back and forth between us and the tax office to get that, especially that debt rate down to the portion of a penny that they're satisfied with. And the other thing I didn't mention that was also in your other packet is what the official budget looks like by function, because the sheet we were looking at kind of groups some of the functions. This is what you actually adopt by function. This is what you're required by law to adopt. And then this other kind of weird schedule that is posted on our website, is required to be posted on our website. It actually combines the general fund, the food service fund, and the debt service fund in one schedule, which kind of makes no sense at all. But that's the schedule that's going to be posted. So we'll post that tomorrow after this meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I will now entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the notice, we approve the notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, setting the proposed tax rate and the date, time, and place for the public meeting, August 28, 2025 at 6 p.m. at the Waco ISD Administration Building.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bledsoe. Mr. Bledsoe, is there any discussion?
No.
Mr. Abnusi, is there any discussion?
No.
Mr. Davis, is there any discussion?
No.
Mr. Patton, is there any discussion?
No.
Mr. Ochoa, is there any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it passes. This is, the Waco ISD Board of Trustees will now go into closed session at 7:07 this time to pursue the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Sections .071, .072, .076. All right, at 8:16, the board will reconvene in open session. and we're adjourned.